It is the process of identifying, evaluating, planning, and financing capital investment projects of an organization.
Great thinking. Capital budgeting is the right choice. Although it ignores the time value of money, what is the most common method used in practice for capital budgeting? Right choice. Payback is the best answer. When calculating terminal cash flows, what represents the return on the initial investment of net working capital? Nice work. You chose change in net working capital, and it is correct.
The capital budgeting model that is generally considered the best model for long-range decision-making is the DASH.
You chose discounted cash flow model, and it is correct.
Which of the following adjustments should not be made when computing free cash flow from incremental earnings?
You're right. Subtracting depreciation expenses from taxable earnings is the correct answer.
The additional cash inflows generated due to the investment in new capital budgeting proposal is called DASH. Clear logic. Your choice incremental cash inflows is sound and 100% true.
The payback capital budgeting technique considers.
Correct. No is the right answer. This is the process of planning expenditures that generate cash flows expected to extend beyond 1 year.
Nice selection. Capital budgeting is the correct and valid answer. Which of the following capital budgeting techniques are used under capital rationing conditions?
Smart move. A profitability index is an accurate answer.
This project classification deals with the increasing availability of existing products and services.
Fay.
Perfect. Expansion projects is the correct choice. What is the main advantage of using internal rate of return as a capital budgeting technique? Excellent choice. Considers the time value of money is the right answer. Which of the following is an important type of risk in an international capital budgeting context? Well picked. Political risk is the correct answer. Capital budgeting is a process of identifying, analyzing, and selecting investment projects. DASH. Solid response. Long-term is a valid choice. One of the general characteristics of capital investment decisions except of smart pick. As to payment is the correct choice. Working capital is an investment in short-term assets or investment in current assets, namely sharp thinking. Cash, receivables, inventory, and short-term debt is the right choice. Which type of methods of capital budgeting is regarded as the discounted cash flow techniques? Exactly. Modern methods make sense and it is right choice. DASH is the planning process used to determine whether an organization long-term investments. Well done. Capital budgeting is the right choice. 15. All of the following are widely used methods for evaluating capital expenditures except Bravo! Weighted average cost of capital is the answer. In situations of capital rationing, DASH method is mostly preferred for capital budgeting. Right again, pi is a valid answer. Which of the following costs would you consider when making a capital budgeting decision? Strong choice. Opportunity cost is the right answer. Estimation of cost of capital is not a prerequisite for Dash method. Good job. Your answer works well here.
Which of the following capital budgeting techniques ignores time value of money?
On track. A payback period is the correct answer.
To estimate an unknown number that lies between two known numbers is known as dash.
Nicely done. Interpolation is a solid answer.
Dash is a capital budgeting tool used to rank projects based on their profitability. Well reasoned. Profitability index is the correct choice.
The values of the future net incomes discounted by the cost of capital are called. You got it. Your choice net present values is right. This project classification deals with replacing serviceable but obsolete assets. Excellent. Replacement projects is a brilliant choice. This project classification deals with replacing worn-out and damaged equipment. Good thinking. Cost reduction projects is the right answer. Sufficient working capital is needed to prevent a business from going bankrupt. Correct response. Correct is the most accurate answer. Which of the following formulas will correctly calculate net working capital? Great job! Cash plus inventory plus receivables payables is the accurate answer. Of the following expenses, which one is not considered a capital investment? Valid point. Research and development costs is true. The process of making investment decision in long-term assets is called dash. Smart pick. Capital budgeting is the correct choice. The following types of investment project proposals in capital budgeting are:
Great job. Equipment replacement is the accurate answer.
capital budgeting is the process of dash potential projects and investments. Clear logic. Your choice evaluating is sound and 100% true. What is accept-reject approach of capital budgeting? Well reasoned. 225,000 is the correct choice. Capital budgeting involved the allocation of dash to projects or investment. Correct. Funds is the right answer. Who determines the cutoff date for making a capital investment decision? Well picked. Owner is the correct answer. Which of the following is not a risk-adjusted method of capital budgeting? Well done. Net terminal value is the right choice.
Based on Q1, calculate net present value if the cost of capital is 14%.
Correct response is the most accurate answer. Which capital budgeting technique considers the time value of money? Nicely done. Net present value is a solid answer. The following is types of decision in capital budgeting except dash. Strong choice. To increase revenue is the right answer. This answers the question, how much is my asset worth right now? Exactly. Net present value makes sense. And it is right choice. Cash outflow in respect of a capital budgeting project means dash.
Right again. Initial investment is a valid answer.
There are important considerations in capital budgeting. Except. You're right. To plan for saving money is the correct answer. The dash assumes returns are reinvested at the cost of capital.
Nice selection. Internal rate of return is the correct and valid answer.
The basic discount rate used in net present value analysis is
Right choice. The cost of capital to the firm is the best answer. In proper capital budgeting analysis, we evaluate incremental. Good thinking. Cash flow is the right answer. The feasibility of an investment project can be assessed using. Excellent. Answers A and B are correct is a brilliant choice. A correct decision in capital budgeting will increase dash. Smart move. Shareholders' wealth is an accurate answer. Below are all the importance of capital budgeting except. Nice work. You chose selling back the company assets, and it is correct. Factors that influence capital structure are except dash. Excellent choice. Inflation is the right answer. Payback method of capital budgeting is suitable for dash. Solid response. Small projects is a valid choice.
in capital budgeting, outflow of funds are required dash.
Bravo. At the beginning of the decision is the answer.
In most capital budgeting decisions, the emphasis is on.
You chose cash flows, and it is correct. First step in the process of capital budgeting is dash. On track. Project generation is the correct answer. The following are examples of own capital, except dash. Great thinking. Debt is the right choice. Capital budgets can be both for dash and dash projects. Perfect. Short range, long range is the correct choice. The strength of the internal rate of return concept is. You got it. Your choice tells whether firm value is increased is right. Which of the following is not an element of capital? Good job. Your answer account receivable assured works well here. Capital budgeting involves strategic aspects such as sharp thinking. Purchasing new equipment is the right choice.
Foreign capital can be interpreted in this case as
Valid point. Debt, both long-term and short-term, is true. The first step in capital budgeting process is dash. Nice work. You chose generating long-term investment proposals, and it is correct.
The strength of the profitability index concept is.
Good job. Your answer tells whether firm value is increased works well here. Non-cash expenses are taken into consideration in. Great thinking. Cash flows is the right choice. Capital budgeting enables the company to have. Good thinking. Returns is the right answer. Capital budgeting is primarily concerned with. Great job. Evaluating investment alternatives is the accurate answer. Capital budgeting process is also known as Smart Pick. Investment appraisal is the correct choice. Capital budgeting involves identifying the. Bravo. Cash inflows and cash outflows is the answer. Projects with higher dash index are better. Nice selection. Profitability is the correct and valid answer. Capital budgeting applies in case of dash. Well reasoned. Any of the decision involving capital expenditure is the correct choice.
In capital budgeting, risk refers to
Exactly. The uncertainty of cash inflows makes sense, and it is right choice.
capital expenditure relates to dash.
On track. Expenditure on the acquisition of fixed assets is the correct answer.
What is not a financial report is
Nicely done. Working capital report is a solid answer.
another name is capital budgeting.
Excellent choice. Capital budgeting is the right answer.
Capital budgeting is a part of
Clear logic. Your choice investment decision is sound and 100% true.
capital budgeting is done for
Well picked. Rotation of profits is the correct answer.
networking capital refers to
Well done. Current assets, current liabilities is the right choice.
capital budgeting methods are smart move. Traditional and modern is an accurate answer.
Step 1 in capital budgeting.
You got it? Your choice determined project cost is right. Cost of capital refers to
Valid point. Required rate of return is true.
capital budgeting means you chose investing in favorable projects with high end returns. And it is correct. How you will get all these quiz questions in PDF books format.
Excellent. Contact Narayan Changda is a brilliant choice.